You're standing at the meat case, and you're doing the responsible thing. You skipped the cheap pack. You reached for the one that says Angus, the one with the deep red color and the little word prime in the corner, and on the front, the phrase that closed the deal, product of the USA. You paid more on purpose because you thought more money bought you more truth. Here's the part nobody tells you. On a grocery stake, the three things you're paying the biggest premium for: the country, the grade, and the breed, are the three things the label is allowed to fake the hardest. Not the meat, the words around it. You didn't do anything wrong. You read the front of the package exactly like you're supposed to. The problem is that the front of the package was written by the marketing department, and the only honest paragraph on the whole tray is the fine print most people never turn over to read. So we put steak from 12 stores on the table: Costco, Walmart, Kroger, Aldi, and 8 more. And we judged every one by a single question, not how it tastes, because taste is a story you tell yourself after you've already paid. The question was simpler: what on this label can you actually verify before it rings up? Because that's the only number that protects you. Everything else is a costume. One honest thing before we start, and I'll hold this line the whole way down. Nothing here is going to hurt you if you cook it right. It's about what you paid for versus what you carried to the car, and about a handful of words that were designed, on purpose, to make those two things feel like the same thing. And here's what flips once you see it. The store isn't lying to you, exactly. It's doing something slipperier. It's telling you things that are technically true in a way that's built to be misread. Angus is true. Product of the USA was legally true. Reserve is true in the sense that it's a real word. None of it is fraud. It's costume, and costume is legal, and that's precisely why it works on careful people. The shopper who gets fooled here isn't lazy. They're the one who read the front and trusted it. So let's stop reading the front. Let's start at number 8. Number 8 is Aldi, and Aldi earns this spot with one word, doing enormous work: Angus. The pack says Black Angus in a serious font, and your brain fills in premium. So here's the first thing to burn into memory, because it's on more than half the steaks in this video. Angus is a breed of cow. That's it. It is not a grade. It is not a promise about marbling, or tenderness, or quality. Any cow with enough Angus in it can wear the word, including a low, cheap cut that would never survive a real inspection. The word tells you what the animal looked like, not how the steak will eat. There is exactly one version of that word that means something: Certified Angus Beef, spelled out in full. That's a private program the Angus Association started back in 1978, and to wear at a steak has to already pass USDA Choice, or Prime, and then clear 10 more specs on top: a certain marbling level, an animal of a certain age, a ribeye of a certain size. That version is earned, and it's a mouthful on purpose. Plain Angus, standing alone, clears none of those bars. It's the cheapest premium-sounding word in the entire store, and it costs the company nothing to print. To be fair to Aldi, it isn't hiding anything. The word is accurate. That's the whole point of this video. The most misleading words in the meat case are the ones telling the technical truth, and the next store charges you extra for a slightly fancier one. Number 7 is Target, under its Good and Gather label, and Target is here for the word that comes stapled to Angus, the grade. You'll see Choice Angus and feel reassured. Choice is real. It's a genuine USDA grade, but it's also the middle. Here's the scale nobody explains at the case. The top grade, Prime, the one with the heavy marbling, is only about 2% of all beef in the country. 2%. Everything else you see is choice or select, and grading is voluntary anyway. The meat packer pays a fee to have a cow graded, which means plenty of steak in that case was never graded at all. So when a store leads with Angus and lets you assume prime, it's letting the 2% word do free advertising for the 50% product. And here's the part that reframes the whole case. Grading is voluntary, and the packer pays for it. A meat packer only calls in a USDA grader when the marbling is good enough to be worth the fee. When it isn't, they simply skip the grade, slap Angus on it, and let your imagination supply the rest. So an ungraded steak isn't neutral. It's very often a steak that was looked at and quietly not sent up for judgment. The grade you can trust comes with a shield stamped by an inspector. The words that come without a shield are just adjectives, and sometimes they're adjectives standing exactly where a grade should have been. Number 6 is Walmart, and Walmart brings us to the trick that should make you angriest because you pay for it by the pound. It's called enhanced, or marinated, or you'll see the small phrase, contains up to 12% solution. What that means is the steak was injected with salt water and phosphate before it ever hit the shelf. Up to 8, 10, 12% of the weight you're buying is brine, and you're buying steak by the pound. So a tenth of that price on the most expensive average steak in American history is money for salted water you'll cook off in the pan. If that sounds familiar, it's the exact same play as the rotisserie chicken aisle. Moisture pumped in to make the register ring higher. Put a number on it. On a 2-pound enhanced steak at, say, $13 a pound, 12% solution is nearly a quarter pound of salt water, around $3 a tray, evaporating in your pan. Buy steak weekly, and you're spending well over $100 a year on brine, at the store built entirely on the promise of the low price. And Walmart sits at the center of the supply chain in a way most shoppers never see. In May of 2024, its ground beef supplier Cargill recalled beef over E. coli, sold in Walmarts nationwide. Walmart's own name wasn't on the meat until the sticker went on at the end. Different product, same lesson. The store on the front of the case is almost never the company that made what's inside. Hold on to that, because at the very bottom of this list, it becomes the whole story. Quick one. If turning the package over is already changing how this aisle looks to you, a like genuinely helps this reach the next person paying prime prices for a choice steak. That's it. Back to the case. Number 5 is Food Lion, and this is the one you cannot see with your eyes, which is exactly why it's dangerous. It's called mechanically tenderized, sometimes blade tenderized or needle tenderized. Machines drive dozens of thin blades or needles straight through the steak to break the muscle and make a cheaper cut feel tender. And a tenderized steak looks absolutely identical to an untouched one on the shelf. Here's why that matters. On a normal steak, any bacteria lives on the surface, and a hot pan kills it in seconds. But when the needles push through, they carry whatever was on the surface into the dead center of the meat, the part that stays rare. The USDA tied at least 5 E. coli outbreaks between 2003 and 2009 to tenderized beef, 174 people sick, 1 dead, and a single recall of about 248,000 pounds from one plant in 2009. The government's own estimate runs into the thousands of illnesses a year from this one process. And the scale is the quiet part, roughly 11% of all retail beef, and by some USDA estimates, as much as 18% of steaks and roasts, has been through a tenderizing machine, close to a fifth of the steaks in the case, and not one of them looks any different from an untouched cut. That's the reason a federal rule, since 2016, forces the words mechanically tenderized onto the label, along with instructions to cook it hotter. Read for those words. They are the difference between a steak you can eat pink and one you can't. And remember which store started printing them years before the law made anyone. You'll meet it next. Number 4 is Costco, and if you've seen the other videos, you're expecting Costco to be crowned the villain right here. I'm going to do the opposite, because the label tells a different story than the outrage does. Yes, a lot of Costco's steak is enhanced, and a lot of it is mechanically tenderized. But Costco has been voluntarily printing blade tenderized on those packs since 2012, 4 years before the law required anyone to. On the one axis everyone attacks it for, Costco is quietly the most honest chain in this entire lineup. So why is it still on the list? Because of the halo, and the halo is its own kind of hazard. The $4.99 chicken, the famous return policy, the 2% markup. Costco has earned so much goodwill that people stop reading its labels entirely. They assume that if Costco is selling it, Costco already did the checking. But trust isn't a substitute for the sticker. A membership card doesn't cook the steak to temperature. Costco tells you the truth in small print, blade tenderized, right there, and its most loyal shoppers are precisely the ones least likely to read it, because they believe they've outsourced the worrying. The failure here isn't Costco's. It's that its reputation talks you out of reading the one honest label in the building. Number 3 is Sam's Club, under Members Mark, and Sam's is here for the fanciest word on the shelf, Prime. A Members Mark Prime steak sounds like a steakhouse in a plastic tray, and sometimes it genuinely is that top 2%. But Prime is also the word most worth faking, because it justifies the biggest jump in price for the smallest change you can see. Real Prime carries the USDA shield, an actual stamp, not a font choice. If the only Prime on the pack is a marketing word without that shield, you're paying a prime price for a grade nobody certified. And remember the scarcity. Real Prime is about 2% of all beef. There is not enough genuine Prime in the country for every Prime-sounding steak in every warehouse to actually be it. The math simply doesn't close. So the word does double duty. The real grade for the rare 2%, and the vibe for everything else that borrows its glow. Same trick as the Angus at number 8, just wearing a nicer suit and standing at the top of the escalator, which is where the store above it lives. Number 2 is Kroger, and Kroger takes the trick and dresses it in velvet. Its premium line, private selection, with words like Angus Reserve, is built to feel like a special occasion. Reserve is not a grade. It's not a certification. It's a word a brand team chose because it sounds like something a butcher would say. Same with Butcher's Cut, Select Reserve, Prime Style, Premium. None of them are defined by anyone but the company printing them. They live in the gap right next to the real words, close enough to borrow the shine. You're paying an everyday store a special occasion price for a choice steak, wearing a costume made of adjectives. And Kroger has the receipts to match the theater. Back in 2019, it recalled ribeye and ground beef over E. coli. Concerns the fancy line and the safety recall coming from the same supply chain. The lesson stacks with all the others. The nicer the word on the front, the more it's there to keep you from turning the package over. Number 1 is Whole Foods. Of course it's Whole Foods, the store you drive farther to reach and pay the most to shop at, precisely because you believe the premium buys you honesty. And on some things, it does. The animal welfare standards are real. But look at what your money is actually buying on that steak, because it's the same costume, tailored more expensively. The words grass-fed, responsibly raised, product of the USA. The ones that let Whole Foods charge the highest price in this test are, on a federal level, some of the softest words in the store. Grass-fed has no single enforced federal standard for the label anymore, and a large share of the grass-fed beef sold in America is quietly imported from Australia and South America. And this is the store owned by Amazon, a company worth more than $1 trillion, selling you the feeling of a small family farm, at the highest price per pound on this list. The betrayal at number one isn't bad meat. The sourcing standards here really are better than most. It's that the specific words you're paying the premium for are the ones the label lets anyone print, and you're paying a trillion-dollar company small farm money for them. Nowhere does the gap between the front of the package and the back of the label cost you more per pound. And that phrase, product of the USA, is where it stops being about one store. So pause the countdown. Go back to 2015. For years, beef had to carry country of origin labeling, so you knew where your steak was born and raised. Then the World Trade Organization ruled against it, siding with Canada and Mexico, who won the right to hit the U.S. with over $1 billion in retaliatory tariffs, and within days, in December of 2015, Congress repealed origin labeling for beef entirely, rather than pay. Sit with the order of that. The label telling you where your food came from wasn't removed because it was wrong. It was removed because keeping it was going to cost the meat industry money. Overnight, imported beef no longer had to say it was imported. And it got worse. Because of a loophole. A steak from a cow born and raised in another country, as long as it was merely packed or processed here, could legally be stamped product of the USA. The USDA's own 2022 survey found that 47% of shoppers read that stamp to mean the animal was born, raised, and slaughtered in America. It usually didn't mean that at all. When customers sued over it, including cases naming Kroger and Albertsons, they lost, in 2022, on a stunning ground. The labels had already been approved by the USDA, so you couldn't claim they misled you. The government pre-approved the costume. Only a new rule, taking effect January 1st of 2026, finally requires product of USA to mean the whole life of the animal happened here. For 10 years, it didn't have to. Now here's the math that dissolves the whole aisle. You think you're choosing between 12 stores. You're not. 4 companies, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National Beef, slaughter about 85% of the fed cattle in this country. Watch that number move. It was 25% in 1977, 71% by 1992, and about 85% today. In one lifetime, the beef supply went from hundreds of players to 4, and 2 of those 4 are Brazilian-owned, National Beef through Marfrig, and JBS outright. So when you drive from Aldi to Kroger to Whole Foods comparing steaks and feeling like a savvy shopper, you are, most of the time, choosing between 4 slaughterhouses wearing 12 different store costumes. The variety is on the front of the package. The back is 4 addresses. And these are not clean companies. There's an active federal case out of Minnesota accusing the big packers of coordinating since 2015 to hold down slaughter and prop up beef prices. JBS alone paid $52.5 million in 2022 to settle its part, without admitting wrongdoing, and other settlements pushed the total far higher. That same company's parent pleaded guilty in 2020 to bribing foreign officials, and paid the U.S. Justice Department over $256 million on top of a $3.2 billion corruption settlement back home in Brazil. As of late 2025, the Justice Department was directed to investigate the 4 of them again. That's the machine behind the marbling. 12 names on the front, 4 companies on the back, and the reason your steak, your neighbor's steak, and the premium steak, 2 aisles over, so often taste like they came from the same place, is that they did. Let me kill one myth while we're here, because it steers people wrong at the case, every single time. People believe the brightest, reddest steak is the freshest. It's the opposite of reliable. That red is oxygen reacting with the muscle. And in modern packaging, the color can be managed and held long after the meat would have naturally browned. A brown steak is often just an older cut, that's perfectly fine, and a vividly red one can simply be better lit and better sealed. Color is a marketing surface, same as the words. Two more quick ones. That red liquid in the tray isn't blood the blood is removed at slaughter. It's water mixed with a muscle protein called myoglobin, so bloody tells you nothing about quality. And the butcher counter at the back isn't automatically better than the packaged case up front. At most grocery stores, it's the same beef from the same 4 packers, just cut to order and priced like it's special. And while we're at it, grass-fed does not mean local. Most of the grass-fed steak in an American case was flown in from Australia or Uruguay, which until this year is exactly how it ended up wearing that product of the USA sticker. So who passed? Not a brand, a set of words you can actually check, and any store that lets you check them. The winner isn't the most expensive steak or the one with the most adjectives. It's the plainest label in the case. Look for the real USDA shield, prime, choice, or select stamped, not just typed, because that's a grade an inspector certified, not a word a brand invented. Look for a single ingredient, beef. If the pack lists water, salt, or sodium phosphate, or says solution or enhanced, you're buying brine by the pound. If it says nothing but beef, you're buying steak. Look for the absence of tenderized or the honest presence of it. A store that prints it, like Costco does, is telling you the truth so you can cook it right. And after this January, look for product of USA to finally mean what you always thought it meant. 4 checks, and notice they're the same 4 things the losers hid: the country, the grade, the injection, the tenderizing. Just read forward instead of assumed. A clean label is almost boring. A grade shield, the word beef, a real place, and nothing about solution or tenderizing. That's it. That's the whole winner. The steak that passes isn't the one shouting the most adjectives. It's the one with the least to say, because it doesn't need the costume. And the best move of all costs nothing extra. A real butcher counter, or a store that names the farm, can answer out loud the questions the sticker dodges. Where was this animal born? Was it graded? Was it needled? The stores that will happily tell you are the ones worth your money. The silence, everywhere else, was never neutral. It was the product. Here's how you win this case tonight, without me, without trusting a single word in cursive. Turn the pack over. 1. Find the grade shield and ignore any premium word that isn't backed by it. Angus, Reserve, Butchers, Select dressed as special. 2. Read the ingredient line. Beef is a steak. Beef, water, salt, sodium phosphate is a steak plus a bill for water. 3. Scan the surface and the fine print. For tenderized, if it's there, cook it to 145 degrees and don't serve it rare, because the inside met the outside. Do those 3 reads and you'll outshop every person in that aisle going by the color and the cursive, which, until about 20 minutes ago, was you. Let's close the loop, because you can read the whole costume now. You know that Angus is a breed, not a grade. A word that sounds like quality and guarantees none. You know that enhanced and up to 12% solution mean you're paying steak prices for salt water. You know that mechanically tenderized is the one invisible thing on the label, and the one you most need to see. And you know that product of the USA for 10 years could be stamped on a cow that never lived a day here. 4 words. That's the entire disguise, and you just took it off. Their whole model runs on one assumption: that you'll pay for the adjective and never check the shield, that you'll believe 12 names are 12 choices, that the redder and the pricier and the more American-sounding a steak looks, the more of the truth you're getting. It's the exact reverse. The truth was always in the smallest print, on the back, where the marketing department isn't allowed to write. That assumption just stopped being true for you. So do one thing with this. Send it to the person who always buys the Angus Reserve, because it sounds like the good stuff, the one who'd pay $10 more for the word than the grade. Not to win an argument, and not to scare them off steak. A good steak is still one of the best things you can put on a plate. Just so the next time they're at the case, they turn the package over first, find the shield, read the ingredient line, and buy the boring honest one on purpose. The front was always the costume. Now you can read what's underneath.